Why is it so hard to be alone with your own thoughts? Why are your thoughts so heavy? It's interesting. In 2014, there was a study done by Timothy Wilson, Dr. Timothy Wilson and colleagues, and they did a study with people. They invited participants to sit in a room by themselves, distraction-free, no phones, no other people, for between 6 to 15 minutes. That's it, 6 to 15 minutes. Or you could choose option B, which was to press a button and receive an electric shock. So, again, just paraphrasing, you can either sit alone with your thoughts or be electrically shocked. Guess which gender, by an overwhelming margin, chose the shock over being alone with their thoughts? These guys. In fact, 67% of men chose to be electrically shocked instead of being alone with their thoughts. 25% of women did. It's interesting, maybe you wouldn't choose an electric shock over being in a room alone with your own thoughts, but can we all admit that we have a lot of distractions in this world that we kind of fuel and feed in our own lives so we can avoid having to think about what we're thinking about. So we can avoid having to think about our thoughts. In fact, I know this is true of us because there's something economists call the altered states economy. And it's basically the distraction economy. It's how much we spend per year in North America so we don't have to be alone with our thoughts. And we spend $4 trillion as a culture to not be alone with our thoughts. In fact, we spend it on many different things in this altered state economy. But when you hear a word like a trillion, isn't it weird? Like, it just feels to me like it's slightly more than a million. But it's a lot of money, actually. In fact, if you gave away $1 million per day, it would take you 2,700 years to give away $1 trillion. $1 million a day. Now, think about this. Okay, so how long do you think 1 million seconds is? I'll get you started on the first one. It's 11 days. 1 million seconds is 11 days. What do you think of 1 billion seconds? Maybe it's like, 22 days, maybe 42 days. Well, actually, 1 billion seconds is 31 years. 1 trillion seconds is 31,688 years. There's a gap between a million and a trillion. And we spend $4 trillion per year as a culture and society to avoid being alone with our thoughts, to fuel distractions in our life. And there's all kinds of substances we use. There's some legal substances like alcohol, tobacco, cannabis, caffeine. That's what scholars put as part of this altered state economy. There's also some illicit drugs, cocaine, meth, heroin. These are all things we do to avoid being alone with our own thoughts. But on the same list, these are the ones that were more notable to me because I suspected those ones. But video games is on that list. Social media and pornography are. Things that they're distraction tools and they're medicating vices that we have, all to lower the volume of our own thoughts. See, you can be alone, but totally distracted. Totally engaged with video gaming or something, anything to not have to think about what you're thinking about. So how do we deal with that? It's important we talk about this subject because this is important for a follower of Jesus. I'm going to explain the discipleship aspect of it in a moment. But the researcher, Brené Brown, she says this. This is the problem when we try to numb the negative emotions, the painful experiences we felt in life with these altered substances or even distractions. The problem is we cannot selectively numb emotions. We either numb the painful ones, we will also numb the positive ones. A lot of people in life are not just stuck, they're living a life they don't want to live. And a lot of why they're living that is because they've tried to numb some very painful things in their past, some very strong negativity that runs in their minds and their thoughts. But in doing so, they've not addressed the issue. Instead, they've medicated it. But it turns out it affects everything, even the positive emotions we have in life. See, our attempt to escape pain often creates more pain. Our attempt to escape pain often creates more pain. But friends, I get it. I get the altered state economy, don't you? There are a lot of people that go through a lot of stuff. And this is why healing emotionally is as important as growing spiritually. Because you can grow spiritually, but if you do not heal emotionally, You'll never be alone with your thoughts. You'll avoid being alone with your thoughts. I like what one person said. They said, we live in a culture right now that is hyper-stimulated, overscheduled, and addicted to noise. And the consequences is we lose silence and reflection. That means inch by noisy inch, we die. We're dying. So how do we lose this inability to be by ourselves and be alone with our own thoughts? And why would it even matter? I think that's the more, because we're kind of wired for like, what's in this for me? What's in this for me? Well, there's a lot at stake, actually, to being alone and being able to reflect on what you're thinking about in your own thoughts. In fact, there's a number of things. I like what Henry Nouwen says, but first off, it's like being alone with your own, when you're alone, you can find your own worth in life. So Henry Nouwen says it this way. He says, in solitude, we become aware of our worth, that it's not the same as our usefulness. See, it's when you're alone, that's where you get in touch with the fact in the achievement-free zone that you matter. You matter a lot. The being part of you. The external parts will always elevate the doing part of you. But it's when you're by yourself, you truly get a measure of your worth in life. So also being alone is where you find courage. This author said this, it is in solitude that we find the strength to act with integrity, because it is there we stop running from our fears and we meet them. We toe up against them, embrace them, and even grow from them. When you're alone, you're forced to confront the things that are bullying you in life. And as long as you avoid them, they just keep growing in life. It's when you're alone and you get confronted by those fears and those anxieties and those things that really do control your life, but they're playing in the background. But when you're by yourself, you get a perspective that's different. And all of a sudden, things that are healthy grow and things that are toxic begin to die. But you only experience that, and you only get that courage when you're alone. You also find clarity when you're alone. Clarity, perspective. I know we borrow perspective from other people, and that can be very healthy. But there is something about you when you're all by yourself with your own thoughts that can lend a great growth when it comes to clarity. I read this book years ago. It's called Essentialism by Greg McKeown. And in it, he says this. He says, solitude is a catalyst for innovation. It's where we reflect on ideas and gain the clarity needed to prioritize what truly matters in life. I can always tell someone who's okay with being alone with their own thoughts. I can always see them. There's a confidence about them. There's a steadiness about them. There's a purpose and a direction. You can see it in their life. They're often some of the greatest problem solvers and innovators. Again, not being alone physically, being alone from distractions. So you can think. But I think the two greatest values of being alone with your thoughts is when you're alone, you meet your true self. And I also think that's the reason we don't want to be alone with our own thoughts. Because we meet our truest self. In the stillness of being alone with our thoughts, we often meet our truest self, and I think that scares us. I think it scares us to see ourselves without makeup on, with no filter, just bare, and we know who we are, and that disturbs us. I like Anne Lamott says it this way, my mind is like a bad neighborhood. I try not to go there alone. Anyone feel like that? Like you've got a mind it's like a neighborhood in Toronto you just don't want to go into. You want to go in with somebody, you need support to go there because there's something not setting right. But maybe the greatest advantage of being alone with your thoughts is that's where you meet God. That's where you meet God. A.W. Tozer said it this way, when we become still and silent, we discover that God has been waiting for us all along, ready to meet us. Friends, you come to God alone, you meet with God alone, and you'll stand before God someday alone. It's in those alone moments you build intimacy with God. God knows you, but that's where you discover Him. Community is one of the great areas that God gives us. And we talk a lot about community here because it's a powerful way for you to feel connected to God and to others. It's a necessity in your life. But there is something about the intimacy of just being with God and your thoughts where the Holy Spirit speaks to us in ways that we can't find in the big group moments or the great stimulated moments. It's where we strip away the scaffolding and it's us and God and it's raw and it's real. But let's be honest, that's a hard place to be. It's hard to be alone with your own thoughts because there's a soundtrack playing in your life, and there is one in mine. It's a playlist you've accumulated over the years. There are songs that play in the background, and every time you pause, they get a little louder. It was about 2 years ago, this past February, that I developed ringing in the ears. I don't know if anyone has ever had that, but it was so disturbing at first because at the quietness of night, all I could hear was like cicadas. You know, in the summer you hear cicadas buzzing in the trees and stuff. That's what I could hear all the time. Now, I've kind of gotten used to it over time. But that was so loud. And that's what our soundtrack sounds like when we're all alone with our thoughts. What hits is in your playlist? For many of us, our internal soundtrack has hits like this. You know, the cup's always half empty, and it's probably my fault. You know, there's a pessimism about us. There's something in us that we're down on life and we're down on ourselves. And some of us come by it honestly. But we don't want to be alone with our thoughts because that's the song that starts playing. Or there's this one, judged by everyone except my cat. You know, if you grew up in a home that was all performance driven, you often have that song in your playlist. It's always you feel judged. You feel like you never measure up. You feel like you're only as good as your last win. No, maybe in your life, maybe it's this next hit. I'm never going to amount to anything, but I've got some great memes. You know, this is a song that gets played out in our life when usually it's inserted by people. Maybe nobody said it to you that you'll never amount to anything, but they didn't need to. They demonstrated it to you. Could have been parents, could have been someone you worked with, could have been colleagues, could have been someone in the school ground. And they made it known that they didn't have very high expectations of you. And consequently, this is a song that plays when it's quiet. This is the song that comes, and that's why you want to medicate it. Maybe it's one of these hits. Maybe Destined for Mediocrity. Unless there's a Netflix series, The Binge. But Destined for Mediocrity. You know, maybe the losses have piled up over time. And that's the hit that keeps playing. Or this is my favorite one. If overthinking was a sport, I'd have a trophy case full of anxiety. See, you know, friends, these are the songs that play in the background. Many of our soundtracks are so negative. They're so filled with pain. They're filled with insecurity and defeatism and hopelessness and fatigue and even addictive cycles. No wonder none of us wants to be alone with our own thoughts. So what do? I love it when science and ancient wisdom, when science finally catches up to ancient wisdom. I love when that happens. And it does in the New Testament. Actually, the Apostle Paul kind of plays the part of being a neuroscientist in the New Testament part. I want to share two what I call linchpin verses. They're not linchpin according to your salvation. They're not necessary to adopt for your salvation. But they are if you're going to live a kingdom Jesus way and you're going to walk through this life with any sense of victory or the abundant life. You know, it always bothered me. Jesus said that we could have an abundant life in this life. It wasn't just the life to come. The abundant life is not a life free of trouble, free of hardship. It's not that. Its abundant life is one that is tapped into a wellspring of joy and peace that passes all understanding. A joy that truly is your strength. And many of us limp along in our faith walk because we've not won the battle of our minds. We've not won the battle over our thinking. And the Apostle Paul kind of shares a couple of linchpin verses. The first one I'm going to share is one that as a young adult changed my life. The last one I'm going to share is the one that my mom drilled into us when we were little kids over and over and over again. And both of them have brought life to my thinking. Now, I don't want to stand here and pretend to be someone that's won the battle of my mind. That's a daily battle. But I don't know how you're trending. And I'm really concerned with how you're living, not your activities. I'm very concerned about your being and your thinking. So Paul says this to a church in Rome. And the Roman church would have been a lot like ours, very multicultural. It was a large city, people from many different backgrounds, different life experiences, but they had something in common with us. Every one of them had a past. Everybody had history. Everybody had brokenness. Nobody was perfect. So when Paul speaks to them, he's speaking to us. So I'd like us to actually say this linchpin verse together. I've spoken this many times. It's so transformative, but hopefully we'll see it from a different lens today. But I'd like you to say it out loud with me. You sang so well with Margaret and the team, and that was such a beautiful song too they sang just beforehand. But so you have your voices tuned up and ready, right? Well, 3 of you do, but the rest of you are going to join in. Let's read this scripture out loud. Let's say it together. Do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your minds. See, Paul calls us not to conform. Don't conform. He says, be a nonconformist. Be an anti-establishment person. Be the resistance. Be the rebel. But against what? Against the pattern of this world. Or another translation says, against the age, the present age we live in. I like what the J.B. Phillips version says. Don't let the world squeeze you into its mold. Don't let the world squeeze you into its way of thinking, its way of living, its way of acting. Don't let it, friends. It's doing it constantly. We participate in it. But there's something different Paul calls us to. He says, don't conform. See, there's a little rebel in me, a little punk rebel in me. I know it. And I've noticed something as I've aged in life, because I was a little redheaded kid that always wanted to fit in. And I starved for that attention. I was always trying to fit in. I've learned over time, fitting in is overrated. It's just overrated, friends. I don't mean getting along with people, being connected to people. You need that, I need that. But fitting in is overrated. And for the follower of Jesus, it certainly is. And some of the most impressive people I've ever met in life are people who kind of dance to their own drumbeat. I don't mean like in some sort of that guy's weird. I mean like he's doing something different in this world. Elbert Einstein said it this way: the one who follows the crowd will usually go no further than the crowd. The one who walks alone is likely to find himself in places no one has ever been. See, the little adventure in me, that's what I want. I don't want to just go as far as the crowd. I want to go to places no one has ever been. No, I know in human history, it's kind of hubris to think that you're going to go somewhere that humans before you haven't gone. We all are, it's like temptation. It's common to all of us. You think you're alone in your temptation? You're not alone. We all deal with it. We all have stuff going on. People have before, people will after. So it's not like somehow some sort of hubris that I'm going to go and do something that's never been done before. But I want to go to places of intimacy with God and in His kingdom that maybe the crowd was unwilling to go to. How do you get there? Well, it's about not fitting in. It's about not conforming to this present age. It's about marching to a different drumbeat. It's this idea that, and this is where I think Christians lose this all the time in the society and world. You know, what did Jesus say His followers would be known for? Their opinions? You'll know my followers by their opinions. How they vote? You'll know my followers by how they vote. What car they drive? What job they have? You'll know my followers by their nationality or their church attendance? No. Jesus said, you will know my followers by their love. It's a different ethic. It's a different way of living. It's a different mindset. So Paul says, don't conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. So don't conform. The only way we cannot conform to the pattern of this world is to be transformed. We need to be changed. And the only way to change is to renew our thinking. Renew our thinking. That's the only way we'll change. So again, Paul is talking like a neuroscientist. He's talking about neuroplasticity. And that's the ability of the brain to reorganize itself, change different neural pathways and neural connections. In other words, you can change the patterns of your thinking. That's what Paul's saying. You need to change the patterns of your thinking if you're going to truly transform, if you're going to live a transformed life. So Paul says renew. And the word he uses in the Greek, the original language it was written in, is metamorpho. And it means to change form. Literally, if you're going to not conform, you need to change form. If you're not going to conform, you need to change form. And the only way we do that is by renewing our thinking. Now, I like this little word because it doesn't occur that much. There's a couple of passages that it does occur, that this word recurs in the New Testament. And then one of my favorite ones is back in the Gospels. There's this moment where Peter, James, and John are going with Jesus up a mountain. It's called the Mount of Transfiguration. And they go up there and they meet Elijah and Moses. It's an incredible moment. But Jesus is changed, transformed. Something drastic changes there in front of the disciples. So it's in two accounts in the gospel. In Matthew's gospel, it says his appearance changed, it metamorpho. From the inside out, right before their eyes, sunlight poured from his face, his clothes were filled with light. I mean, how cool would that have been? But how scary, too. You just walked up this mountain with Jesus. You know, he's your homeboy. You've been hanging out with him. And all of a sudden, there's light coming off him. He's just totally transformed. I like Mark's passage, and I'm going to read it in the Gen Z version because I think it's even funner. He says, Jesus starts glowing and changing, metamorpho, before their very eyes. And his outfit was like super lit. See, all my boys are just rolling their eyes right now. Don't speak like that, Dad. You're too old. So when you meet each other in the lobby after this gathering, and you're saying, you're looking good. You're looking super lit. Just throw that one down. Super lit. Try that with your grandkids. That'll work. His outfit was like super lit, shining so bright, even whiter than fresh snow, like no clothing brand can make them that white. These are dramatic images of change. It's a dramatic image. It's an undeniable one. It is there for anyone who was there. They saw it. It was quite dramatic. And that's the same word that Paul is saying needs to happen to our thinking. A dramatic change in thinking. A dramatic shift in our mind. Do not conform. How do I not do that? You need to be transformed. How do I do that? By renewing your mind. The neuroplasticity. We can change our thinking. And that's what Paul's leading us into because it needs to change. If you're going to live the type of life that Jesus calls you to, a lot of Christians live such a life where they're limping through it. Their faith is a crutch. And I don't mean like all of us need a crutch because none of us are perfect. We all need a Savior. But our faith becomes something we just hold on to. We live for a weekend. You're meant to thrive in this world. And I don't mean problem-free, but thrive despite what's going on around you. The only way we can do that is by being renewed. Our thoughts need to be renewed. How do we do that? Linchpin verse number 2. This is my mom's special. I don't know how many times my mom put this verse up in front of us. Summing it all up, friends, I'd say you'll do best, and I like that, you'll do best. This is not attached to your salvation. You can still know me. You can still make it to heaven. This is not about that. But you'll do best in this life by filling your minds and meditating. Filling your mind and meditating on, I want you to say these things with me, on things that are noble, reputable, authentic, compelling, gracious, the best, not the worst, the beautiful, not the ugly, things to praise, not things to curse. Think about those things. Get your mind on those things. Allow those things to transform you. This is a passage about thought management. Thought management. You know, when you think of that soundtrack plays in your life, I don't know what's playing in your life, but everyone has a soundtrack. And I guarantee all of us struggle being alone with our thoughts, especially at night. Sometimes they play extra loud at night. You can't wait for the morning to come. In my soundtrack in life, there's regrets. There's, I wish I could have a do-over. There are things that people have said to me over the years that have wounded me and is still in the background because I haven't dealt with it. There are things that I've said about myself. And that makes us all want to quiet the noise by distracting ourselves and not being alone. But what if you could fix your eyes and think about things that are beautiful? Things that are true, things that are right. Because whenever you think of something beautiful, or you see something beautiful, you're seeing an element of God there. You're seeing an element of God. Like that's why when you go into creation and you go and you see the trees and the greenery and the blue sky and the wind is just perfect, and you just feel God there. Why? Because you're seeing his creative beauty. You're seeing something, anything that's true and right and noble is a representation of God. You know, I think Thomas Aquinas said this: God is beautiful, beautiful in such a way that all beautiful things are beautiful by him. They're all made beautiful by him. So it's his creation, and we get joy from those things. We feel a connection to him. A few years ago, I read this book, and I've recommended it to a number of people when they're stuck in negative loops, negative mindsets, negative soundtracks, and it's ironically just called Soundtracks, by a Christian author, but it's not necessarily a Christian book, but it's John Acuff. But I feel like John plagiarized Paul. I'll be honest with you. I think he took some of that ancient wisdom and he packaged it in a modern way, which is good on him, but he probably made some money off of Paul's teaching here. But Paul says it quite well, and John does too. John says it this way, kind of one of the quotes from the book I like. He says, the truth is, you can choose your thought patterns. And if you don't believe that, you'll always be a victim to it. You need to know that you have the power to choose your thought patterns. And you can change the way you think. In other words, you can swap your old soundtrack for a new one and upgrade your life in the process. I feel like some of us are primed and ready to swap some of our old tracks out with some better tracks, things that God might say even about us. And he encourages us to do it two ways. And the first way, again, I think he stole from the Apostle Paul. He says, take inventory of your thoughts. How many times have you ever stopped to think about what you're thinking about? The soundtrack that's just playing in the background. To really pause and think about what dominates your thoughts. That's incredibly important. You know, the Apostle Paul said it, I think, even better. He said, take every thought captive and make it obedient to Christ. Take every thought captive. And I imagine a thought comes in and you're grabbing hold of it. But you're to examine your thought and make it obedient to Christ. So in his book, Soundtracks, he says to examine your thoughts this way. When you're having thoughts, ask yourself these three questions. Is this thought true? Is it helpful? Is it kind? Is it kind to you, friend? Some of you guys are your own worst bullies. Is it kind to others? I keep a journal. I wish I was faithful to it. I think some people on staff keep journals that are daily. Maybe some of you do. I'm not that good at that. But I do journal when I'm doing well in good seasons, and sometimes when it's a really hard season. I was looking back through my journal, and one thing I do, at the end of every time I do an entry, I always record my emotions. What am I feeling? So I have a little chart here that helps me, because I'm not good at emotional language. That kind of gives me some emotions that I can choose from. Some of my entries, I was looking through this as I was thinking about this message. I was thinking about some of the entries that I've had this year. In August of this year, I wrote this. It was August 1st. I said, I met a woman named Ida today. She's a 71-year-old Armenian Christian. I think I told you about her. Her energy and zeal for Jesus was so invigorating and challenging. Jesus, this is my prayer, ignite my heart and fill it with a simple faith and passion. And then I shared my feelings. Today, I'm feeling grumpy, annoyed, impatient, must have been driving, irritated, and thankful. How can I be those things plus thankful? Because I'm complicated, and so are you. If everything was in a linear fashion, that you were just always up and to the right or down and to the left, it's not like that. You're a mixed bag. That's why people in your life have trouble understanding you. You're a mixed bag, so am I a mixed bag. This is why we prioritize emotional health around here. Well, I'll get to that in a second. But I'm a mixed bag, and so are you. Then I looked at my September 18th. It's just after the kickoff weekends. And I wrote this: thank you for your grace. Thank you for being so faithful that I can place my faith in you, and I know I can depend on you, God. And then I go through and I thank God for the people that he's given me in my life, my supporting cast, the people that care about me. And then I end it this way: thank you for being so trustworthy and dependable. Help me to be more like you. The feelings I feel today. Thankful, confident, I'm doing well here. Trusting, lonely, afraid. See, friends, the soundtracks that play in our life, if we don't identify them, here's what happens. Every time I identify emotion, I ask myself, why am I feeling that? And I often find out it's not true. I'm feeling lonely because I'm feeling whatever I'm feeling. But I have to remind my emotion, wait, I'm not. I am connected. There are people that know me and love me, and I know and love. So that is a feeling that I can let go. Is it helpful? Is it going to help me move to a place where I can move into my workday or something? Maybe it's I'm not talking about dismissing emotions. Listen to your emotions. They're often telling a better story of what's going on in your life. But again, they don't always give you the full picture. So capturing your thoughts. I capture emotions. I try to capture thoughts. Capture them and make them obedient to Christ. So he says, if it's not true, discard it. If it's not helpful, discard it. If it's not kind, discard it. And then move from taking inventory of your thoughts to borrowing some new thoughts. Borrowing some new thoughts. That's what Philippians 4, chapter 8 is all about. It's about replacing your soundtrack, changing your neural pathway. Again, Paul is playing the part of a neuroscientist in a way. He's saying something that scientists have known for years, but he's saying it way before them. That when you fix your mind on things that are true and noble and praiseworthy and positive, it has an effect to your mental health, a benefit to your mental health. I know that's probably not surprising to anyone in this room, but your prefrontal cortex actually settles down. The amygdala settles down. Stress and fear and anxiety dissipate, and more happiness and peace gets elevated. This is why it's beneficial to be alone with your thoughts. But the only way we can truly do that is by renewing our thinking on things that are better. So we mentioned this last couple of weeks, we're running a course here called Emotionally Healthy Spirituality. Because we can teach all kinds of spiritual values, which are incredibly important. But if your emotional health is suffering, you'll never rise above that limit. You'll never rise above that moment. We're an integrated human being. You're complicated. You're not a box. You don't have a church box over here. You have a money box over here, a sex box over here, a spiritual box here. It's all mixed together. And one thing affects another part of your life. And that's why paying attention to what you think about is so important. So Paul gives us some ways to maybe filter our thoughts. And you caught it in that verse. He gives us some ways to filter these thoughts. The first one is it true, right? And has it ever been harder to answer that question? I sat with someone a couple weeks ago, and they're talking about their YouTube videos that they've been watching about the politics south of the border. And they don't know what's true anymore. I get it. People talk with such authority. People spin stuff like nobody else. Here's the way I decipher things when people are giving their expert opinions. I always ask myself first, are they being objective? Are they being, like the more insistent, or if they speak in absolutes, I'm careful. Anyone who speaks in absolutes like that, except about God, but like all those absolutes, I'm very careful, because usually they're filled with little generosity and little objectivity. And then if they're angry, I know they're playing me. They want to play me. Anger is a way to recruit us into their cause. So I'm very careful. I'm wary. I watch the tone and the emotion of somebody presenting. Are there facts being presented? Do they actually cite where those facts are from? Those things help me determine whether or not this is true. That's an important thing to do in your life. Is this true? The second thing, and I think I love how Jesus handles this. He says in the New Testament, count the cost if you're going to follow me. Weigh my teaching. Test it. Try it. Tell me, challenge it, go ahead. He's not insecure. It's a pathway to life, the Jesus way. So go ahead, test it, ask those questions, consider it. Is it true? Then the second one, is it noble? Does it bring dignity to other human beings? Or does it denigrate them? Does it diminish the human beings around you? Or does it elevate them? If it doesn't elevate them, maybe don't hold on to it. Then is it reputable? Is it honest? Is it trustworthy and admirable? Is it ethical? Is it authentic? Is it honest or genuine or free of falsehoods? Is it compelling? Does it inspire others to good things? That's compelling. Is it gracious? I love the little word that Paul uses for this. It's often translated, maybe in your version of the Bible, lovely. Is it lovely? And it's talking about, does it inspire a kindness and love towards others and towards yourself? Is it the best? Another word for that, another translation would be, is it excellent? In other words, does it inspire good morality and goodness in your life? Is it beautiful? Is it spiritually uplifting? And then finally, is it praiseworthy? Paul's talking about, does it give recognition and honor to others? See, when you think about those things, it changes the way you approach things. See, I know this about you, because it's true of me. We tend to harbor things people have said about us because we value their voice so much, because it's often attached to our need to be accepted. So I want to be accepted, and I want to hear good things from you about me. And when I hear bad things from you about me, it gets in that playlist and starts to play over and over. I think it's not just the things people say about us, it's the things we've said to ourselves. Anyone who's been honest with themselves has sometimes been less helpful to themselves too. I believe in being honest with yourself. But it's amazing, we pick up things from people and you start to believe you're not worth it. You don't matter. And then sometimes it's not just the things we've heard or the things we've said about ourselves, it's the things we've done. Man, the pool of regrets that's in this room. You think you've got regrets. You might be tempted to put them back on the table if you saw the people's regrets around you. We all have seismic regrets. And isn't it interesting? I think at night for me, maybe it's different for you, they just come to roost. They want to magnify themselves in my mind's eye when I'm all by myself. Look at the regrets. What kind of dad were you? What kind of husband are you? What kind of man are you? It's all these regrets of things because I forget all the good moments, but I remember all the failings like they just happened. And it's not just what you've done. For some of us, our soundtrack's filled with what people have done to us. And you have a lot of pain and disappointment. And you can't be alone with yourself. But here's the truth. We all need our thoughts and our minds washed by the Spirit. We need that, friends. We're perishing because of our inability to be alone with our own thoughts, to be present so we can access God, know our truest selves, gather courage, know our worth and value, gather perspective and clarity. We need those moments alone, but our thoughts won't leave us alone. That's the problem. So we find ourselves busied in those moments. Here's what matters most, though. What matters most in my life is not what you say about me. Because it'll be a mixed bag. Some people will think I'm better than I really am. Some people will think I'm worse than I really am. And every time I live for what people say about me, I give them power and I lose power and God loses his voice in my life. So it's not what you say that matters most to me. And it's not even what I say about me. What matters most and should matter to most of us is what God says about us. Who he says you are. We're going to sing a song, and I'd invite you to close your eyes and let the music team sing it over you. I'm going to come back and pray for you. And then we have some next steps. But I'd invite you to listen to this song and think, Holy Spirit, would you speak to minds and hearts in this room right now? And would you remind them of what you think about them? And may you reorder those neural pathways in our life, renew our thinking. We don't want to be people that just conform to this world. We want to be transformed by the renewing of our minds. So we choose to believe what you say, over what this world says and what we say.